We must start our meeting because the time is running very fast. Let me first of all greet you. I am very glad and honored to chair this debate. First of all, I would like to remind the members of the committee that this is part of our meeting, and I assume that members are here, so we need to adopt the agenda first. Anybody has something to say concerning the agenda? Can we adopt the agenda? Yes, the agenda is adopted. Now, dear colleagues, once again, and dear mayors and invited guests, as the chairperson of the Assembly Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development, I am pleased to open our debate on living together in a multicultural societies, respect, dialogue, interaction. I welcome in particular the many mayors and their representatives who came all the way to Strasbourg for the celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Euro Prize. As you know, this year the prize has been awarded to Dresden in Germany and the city of Vara in Sweden. And their mayors are our keynote speakers, together with the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Muzhneks. So with so many tragedies afflicting our continent, Europeans seem divided on the questions of integration of foreigners of different faith and also migrants or refugees streaming in from the Mediterranean, and I should perhaps put the word foreigners in inverted commas, because many of those facing hostility have been living with and among us for many years already. Both the parliamentarians and the mayors or other local representatives present in this room have been confronted to specific local situations, positive or negative, and could enlighten our debate today. I think in particular of countries where the rise of extremist political movements has spread suspicion and fear across society. So let us now start the debate, for which we have about 40 minutes. We shall stop at about 2:50 p.m. so we could all move toward the chamber for the solemn ceremony making the 60th anniversary of the Euro Prize. And without further much ado, I give the floor to Ms. Ren Widham, journalist from the United Kingdom, who will moderate our discussion with the participation of a panel of guest speakers. So, Ms. Widham, welcome. Now you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ghileţchi. Very nice to meet you too. Good afternoon, everybody. Bonjour, or bon après-midi, guten Tag, buenos tardes, buongiorno, and especially for you, Mr. Ghileţchi, buenos ziua. I'd like to introduce you to our three panelists this afternoon, two from winning cities of this, the 60th Prix d'Europe. From Dresden and from Vara. By the way, the runner-up cities were Amélie in France, in case anybody's from there, Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine, and Lublin in Poland. So this Prix d'Europe was a very tightly contested one, and the winners are highly deserving, as you will hear this afternoon. So our guest speakers are Mr. Dirk Hilbert, who's acting mayor of Dresden, Mr. Fredrik Nylander, Mayor of Vara in Sweden, and Mr. Niels Mulzniek, known to many of you already, the Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe. Each panelist will have a few minutes to talk about their area, and then the most important part will be you, the audience, putting questions and stimulating a discussion afterwards on the theme of living together interculturally in cities with respect, dialogue and interaction. So let's head off now first to Dresden. A little bit of background. It's the capital of Saxony with a population of around 500,000. It has twinning relations with 13 other cities, 10 of which are in Europe, one in Africa, one in the USA, and one in China. In 1959, Dresden established its first twinning with Coventry in the UK, which, like Dresden, was destroyed in the Second World War. Dresden is very active in the Never Again movement to fight anti-Semitism, racism and xenophobia, and to promote peace and reconciliation. Like other parts of Germany, Pegida is a problem, which you'll be hearing more about, but Dresden has decided to focus on school exchanges, artistic, sporting and professional exchanges. So now I give you Dirk Hilbert. Thank you.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I will speak first of all in German because I got prepared in German language. I hope we can discuss later on in English too, and so sorry for that.
Kein Problem.
Ladies and gentlemen,
when you think about a definition for a multicultural society, you find various options, and they are more or less self-explanatory. Broadly speaking, you can say that we're talking about a society where you have people from different ethnic backgrounds living together, a society with different cultures, a multiplicity of languages, of ways of living, customs and ideas about the world. As a matter of principle, societies which are multicultural are enriched societies. They represent their own culture, but they do, of course, require respect and tolerance vis-à-vis foreigners and those who are different. That is the only way to find a way towards dialogue and success. In Europe and in various regions around the world, we have various examples of cultures living side by side in the same society. When it comes to composition, of course, we have great differences. Look at the figures that apply to our city, Dresden, and our partner city, Rotterdam. In Dresden, we have approximately 3.5% of our population that come from a migrant background. In Rotterdam, we're talking about 49%. Ladies and gentlemen, recently we've been talking about the coexistence of different cultures in Europe, and we've been talking about it in connection with migration. Flows of migrants, of course, do represent challenges for host countries, because they want to make sure that new migrants are able to integrate more easily into their new societies. At the same time, of course, the refugees arrive with a hope for safety, for tolerance, for respect, for understanding of their ways of living on the part of the autochthonous population. Now, this can, of course, also lead to some problems. We've seen this recently. For instance, in the case of Dresden, these last few months, we made the headlines because we weren't just talking about borders, we were talking about Pegida. And we had demonstrations which I'm sure you've seen. Now, I can't, of course, talk about all the aspects pertaining to this. You have to know about the context, and therefore, if I may, I'd just like to say a few words about the situation. The Pegida demonstration at the beginning, in particular, showed that in our population there is a lot of dissatisfaction, disenchantment. People are disenchanted because of the way in which politics and administration are communicating, the fact that decisions take a long time to arise, and a lack of transparency is felt. Pegida is not a phenomenon particular to Dresden, nor indeed to the east. Dresden has been a platform for these demonstrations, but at the end of the day, these participants also assembled throughout the whole country. We have had, of course, demonstrations in front of our city hall, particularly well-attended demonstrations, but I think it's important to make it quite clear that we're not just talking about one city or one region, that we're not the only ones to have a problem. A problem is a problem shared by all, I'm afraid. Now, I think it's a good thing that when it comes to the participants of the demonstrations, politicians try to enter into contact with them, to speak to them, to have a dialogue. We've set a process in motion, and we hope that at the end of the day, more communication will mean a better relationship between politics, administration and citizenship. And I would like to speak about the situation in the last few months because I have happy news. The situation has evolved in a positive direction in many areas. For instance, the integration of foreigners. I think we've reached a new level, a high point, and I think it goes to prove that if you take action, if you launch projects, you can achieve something. For instance, 2 weeks ago we had in the very centre of the city a big initiative in the old market of Dresden with the participation of many people, and we had food, we had a food court with different dishes from various countries and regions and a lot of discussion. So 3,000 people got together and proved that you can have multicultural coexistence and that diversity can have a very great added value effect. So these actions, these activities are important, and I think that Dresden has proven that it is a city that is open to the world, that is interested. Many activities have been organized also with our 13 twin cities, with the involvement of Dresden in European projects, cooperating also in European networks. These are all examples of our really formidable international engagement. We're very proud. We're particularly proud of the fact that civil society has participated, private individuals have participated through associations and also through institutions such as schools and universities. So it shows a dedication, and Dresden, as a capital of our land, has shown that it can really move forward and has been very honoured, of course, in terms of the Europe Prize. We are extremely proud of having been awarded the Europe Prize this year. And particularly important, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that we are focusing on pupils, so on the young, on students. And to come back to the discussion topic for today, you know, these are people who are involved right from the beginning and who can show respect and tolerance vis-à-vis foreigners, those who come from the outside of the city or the region. They can practice this on a daily basis. It's an opportunity to get to know people from another country, from another cultural area, to maybe spend some time over in those other communities. It's a very valuable experience for young people. These exchanges, these twinnings are a basis for a dialogue based on respect and a multicultural coexistence and co-project. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dirk Hilbert, for giving such a positive initiative from Dresden for the 3,000 people gathering in the centre of town. And you are quite right in saying that Pegida is not just a limited problem, it is a symptom of a problem that we face across Europe, which is what we're here to think about discussing. So next we're heading to the other Prix d'Europe winner, which is Vara in Sweden. It's a small town with a population of less than 16,000 inhabitants, specializing in agriculture, industry and public service. It's in the Västergötland province, twinned with 6 European cities. In 2012, it signed a friendship agreement with Huangshan in China. Its twinning involves exchanges in trade, environment, culture, education, social insurance, public health, administration, and human resources. The schools of Vara are in contact with schools in 11 different countries. And the theme of Mr. Nylander's talk will be young people. So Fredrik Nylander, as the mayor of Vara, the motto of your town is, "We both can, want, and dare." So I'm curious to hear how. Mr. Nylander.
Yeah, thank you. European Parliament's mayors, ladies and gentlemen, never has there been a time when keywords like respect, dialogue, and interaction has been more urgent than today. We experience unruly times, a demanding area. It's necessary to explore the opportunities that lie in cooperation, collaboration, and coexistation. We need to practice democracy, defend freedom, and use all means of the modern world to meet another, in person or by using technology. That makes space and time almost irrelevant. We need not only to talk one another, but also to listen. Listen with care and ambition to understand. Dialogue is as much about listening as about talking. To be able to coexist in this ever-changed world, we need to feel comfortable in it. Our children need to grow up into world citizens, as natural as they are nationals. For us in Vara, it all starts with curiosity. We want to get to know other people and generally understand what we can learn from them. We have participated in many European projects, collaborations, partnerships, and exchanges during a number of years. For example, our schools all have sister schools in other countries. All our municipal staff has participated in service development activities starting abroad. We're happy to live in relations with our European twin cities in Finland, Estonia, Norway, Spain, and Czech Republic. Our international ambitions don't stop at the European border, Our sixth twin city is Xuangshan in China. We believe that our future lies in working across borders. Our local community needs it. Our economic development depends on it. Our understanding of what goes on in the world is based on it. We believe that respect for others and respect for the future challenge unnecessary demands result it means for trust and dialogue between equal partners. At the same time, we are benefit from it as a community. We add to change our successful Europe in a peaceful world. We believe that doing things together with friends and colleagues is always a better way to face difficulties than to work alone. It started with addressing the keywords locally, at home, by respect, dialogue, interaction. It will take you wherever you want. Opportunities are endless when we work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nylander. And indeed, it's important to work across borders, right across the world. And listening is the most important part of dialogue. That was a very valuable thing to point out. Thank you very much. And now we're going to hear a few words from Nils Mullsnieks, who's been a Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe since 2012 and has a background as a human rights activist and political scientist. Over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today and to share the podium with such distinguished guests. Congratulations, by the way, on winning the award. I think it's great that we have some good examples to show to other countries. We're sorely lacking in them. Let me start by asking a rhetorical question. Who is it that we as Europeans have the most difficult time in living together with? I would submit that it's migrants and Roma. This is based on my own work, but I think if you look at sociological research surveys, you will find that the people we have the most difficult time in living together with are migrants and Roma. The migration issue is increasingly occupying my time day and night and all of my work, and migration has become the most toxic, divisive issue in Europe. Governments are building walls and fences. They're pushing back migrants from the borders. They're detaining them if they happen to enter. New political movements and parties are evolving and emerging around only this issue. The tone of debate is getting more hysterical and less rational, and European solidarity is nowhere to be seen. As people are dying in the sea, the European migration system is collapsing around us. Dublin returns cases are clogging up courts and can often no longer be implemented because of political or legal reasons. The southern states, led by Italy, are saving people, but afterwards these people are heading north of their own accord to try to find a life for themselves where they're not welcome at all. And any talk of enforced solidarity via quotas evokes a furious response. While some of these migrants are from outside of Europe, a significant number come from within Europe. There are people taking advantage of free movement within the EU, but there are also Roma and others from the Western Balkans, which have ignited a very kind of toxic debate in many countries. What have I tried to stress in my work in countries? I've visited now 27 countries over the last few years with full reports. I've focused on this issue on migration and tolerance and racism and Roma in country after country. I have highlighted the necessity of combating hate speech. Words and images matter. They create an atmosphere in which discrimination and violence become legitimate and therefore more likely. So we have to be very careful about how we talk and portray these issues. I would like to express my support for the No Hate Speech movement launched by the Council of Europe in 2013. I think they're doing a great job in equipping young people with the tools and skills needed to recognize and to act against hate speech online. I think it's critical to reclaim the internet as a space for human rights. I think we need to prosecute hate speech, but we also need better self-regulation and monitoring of the media. ECRI, the European Commission Against Racism and Tolerance, the Council of Europe's anti-racism monitoring body, has highlighted the link between stigmatizing media reports about minorities and racist violence. Racist crimes are more serious than other crimes. They're more traumatic for the individual, takes individuals longer to recover, and they're far more corrosive of social cohesion than other crimes. They can send out signals spreading fear throughout entire communities of migrants or minorities, because anybody could have been a victim from that community. But somehow police, prosecutors, courts very frequently ignore the racist motivation behind hate crimes. Why? I think there are a number of reasons. One, I think it's easier to prosecute crimes without looking at this racial motivation. Very often, they're not aware of the pernicious nature of such crimes, or they might have their own biases as well. And I often discuss this in country visits with prosecutors and courts, and they say, oh, these kinds of crimes, they take up a very small percentage of our work. The numbers are really quite small. We have this problem under control. And I say, listen, it's only the tip of the iceberg that you're seeing, because people are afraid to report such crimes. They don't know where to turn. And if they do complain, very often the racist motivation is not taken into account. These crimes are very serious. Please look into them and take it quite seriously, because they can rip apart your communities. But in general, even if we have good law enforcement, good media, if we don't have political leadership, we will lose the battle. And political leadership at the national level has been sorely lacking in most countries to lead the way, to lead a rational debate on migration, to lead a rational debate on Roma inclusion. Very often they pander to the lowest common denominator, pander to fears and prejudices. This is why I'm so glad that there are leaders at the local level, leaders in cities such as Vada and Dresden, who have realized that there's another way forward. And I hope that you can serve as a good example, not only to other cities in your countries, but to other cities throughout Europe. And congratulations again, and thank you for your good work.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner Milsnieks, for a very good overview and pull together of all the ideas so far. And it's absolutely true that words and images do matter, and if you keep saying them over and over again, people start to believe them. Anyway, it's now over to you. You've heard a lot from us. I will set the ball rolling while you're thinking and concretizing your questions, and ask perhaps all the panel for a quick comment on the thought that unfortunately, anti-immigration and Islamophobia often are vote catchers, and that enormous numbers of votes go to people like Marine Le Pen and Nigel Farage in the UK. And how can we really act against that kind of thing, act against the politicians who go for the lowest common denominator and the lowest feelings? Commissioner Milsnieks, you're nodding, so I'll start with you.
Yes, this is quite a worrying trend that we've seen. I think what's been interesting, if you look at European debates in many countries, the moderates do not want to discuss migration because they don't know how to have a liberal, progressive debate about migration. So they left the field to the populist extreme right or extreme left. And I think this is a huge mistake, because migration is an issue that we need to discuss. We need to discuss how best to integrate migrants, how best to have a rational policy, how best to have to minimize risks and manage risks. One thing that really strikes me everywhere in Europe that I've gone to look at migration issues is that everybody's surprised by sudden influxes of migrants. First of all, Greece was surprised, then Italy was surprised, then Spain was surprised, then Bulgaria was surprised, then Hungary was surprised. Even in Germany, they told me they were surprised by the influx. Why are we surprised? Why are we not prepared? We shouldn't be surprised. The second thing is, people are now, a number of countries are kicking and screaming about quotas and some kind of solidarity mechanism. My question to them is, are you not concerned about risks? If 10,000 asylum seekers from Ukraine, from anywhere, show up on your border, won't you be the first asking for European solidarity? On what basis then will you be able to expect it? Why not think ahead, plan, and promote the integration of migrants and refugees? It is only through migrant integration and refugee integration that we can undermine racism and prepare the ground for social cohesion.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. Mr. Hilbert?
Ja, wir haben ja die Situation.
Thank you. Islamization as a topic. I mean, we have Pegida, and therefore in our city we've been experiencing this firsthand. And I have to be honest with you, you know, to begin with, I thought, who are these idiots? And I apologize for my language, but, you know, foreign citizens, there are so few of them in our city, in fact. And all these people were taking to the streets to demonstrate against the Islamic community. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a whole series of people who are disenchanted, who are dissatisfied, and who've come together. And, you know, in a way, the top of the administration has become a kind of catalyst because, you know, we need to take decisions in our municipal council. We need to also, of course, discuss the issue of homes for refugees, centres for them, and there's been a whole discussion about all this. So decisions have to be taken, you know, what can we do? And unfortunately, our premise was very poor to begin with. So I think we've learned our lesson, really, from this experience. And the previous chief mayor said that there would be a bringing on of citizens upstream to make sure that citizens are involved in consultations, in discussions, in dialogue. It's important to have an open discussion and to think about all sorts of different initiatives. And we have already had some initiatives. And I think, in a way, by organising these projects and activities, we have managed to achieve an added value, something enriching for the city. But I think, to begin with, we underestimated this movement, I have to say, if I'm really honest. Thank you.
And now to Mr. Nylander, please.
Yes, in Vara we have as I said in my speech, we have talked a lot about the young people in the schools. We think if we educate them and tell them that they are a part of the world, Vara is a part of Europe and Europe is a part of the world, and talk lots about that, and they have, with the internet, they have lots of contacts with our sister schools, and they can talk about the problems. I think that's a good way to start educate the young people, because I think it's more difficult with the older people. Then I think we have to go with facts, lots of facts. And we, who has worked as politicians in a small municipality as Vara, I think we have to stand up and talk what solidarity and democracy is, not just in words. So when we are building houses, it's a very small area in Vara, but if we build 20 apartments, maybe 4 or 5 apartments should go to people from other countries, so they can integrate in a good way. We have lots of very small villages in Vara municipality, and when they are coming to the small municipality, in a small village, it's often more easy to get accept in the biggest. So I think to talk about facts and talk a lot about with the young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, questions from the floor. I've already had one hand up. Oh, quite a few. Right. I'm going to take 2 at a time then, so that we... Firstly, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, first a comment about the media that was made. Of course, in Britain and elsewhere, we talk about IS, Islamic State. But what the imams say to me in the mosques across Swansea, and of course there's different mosques. There'll be a Shia mosque who are Iraqi, there'll be a Sunni mosque which is Pakistani, a Sunni mosque which is Bengali, and they've got different perspectives. But what they say is there is no Islamic State, they aren't Islamic, and it's not a state. So why is the media talking about this Islamic State all the time? The second point I'd like to make is you mentioned UKIP. And basically what we've got in Britain and across Europe is a combination of austerity and immigration. And people who are under the boot of austerity cuts, the poorest, are therefore linked. Those two are linked together by UKIP. So they're saying, oh, if it wasn't for the immigrants, you'd have loads of work and loads of money, which of course isn't true. But that's the cocktail that was created before the Second World War when the finger was pointed at the Jewish community. And we need to be saying, these and talk about growth instead of cuts to get down a deficit, rather than allowing this to inflame into some sort of a race war. And finally, it is a good idea having these multicultural events. But the reality of integration is, as people have said, is integrated schools, but also, I don't know how many of the people, there aren't many Muslims in this room, but how many people have Muslim friends that they regularly meet and spend time with. And if they don't, they need to think about the rhetoric and about the behaviour.
Thanks very much, Mr. Davis. We'll discuss that and hold on to that question while we take this next question as well.
My name is Elisabeth Potzinger. I come from Austria, from the city of Graz. I'm a representative of our mayor, Mr. Nagel. I come from this beautiful city of Graz, which won the Europe Prize already in 1979. Actually, 2 days ago, there was a terrible accident in Graz.
Could the interpreters ask that the speaker speak a little further from the microphone? Because the sound system is saturating. If someone is asking in English, please ask the speaker to move a little bit away from the microphone.
Severely hurt, many of them. And why I'm talking about it, I really wanted to thank you for your compassion. Graz has been city of human rights. It is so far the only European city of human rights. And we try to enforce living together peacefully.
Sorry,
excuse me. Is it better like this? Yes. So actually I would like to show just 2 small good practices concerning integration of children with migrant background. We have people from more than 150 countries living in Graz, and so we invited people with migrant background to work in kindergartens as integration assistants. And that's a really good practice, which is now also supported by our foreign minister, Mr. Kurz, who is also responsible for integration. And as you, Mr. Commissioner, also addressed the troubles we sometimes have with Roma people. Actually, as a city of human rights, we want to support Roma people in the countries where they live, in their countries of origin. And I think what they really need, this is education and work, to have a decent life, and we want well-being of families all over Europe. So we support a project where Roma people plant organic garlic, because 80% of garlic for Europe come from China. So, and in these countries where the Roma people live, they have good soil, and it's not very difficult to learn how to grow this organic garlic properly. And the center of education is in Graz, in the city of Graz, where Roma people are trained how to do it properly. And about 200 Roma families are already engaged in this project. And thanks to the Council of Europe, it has been introduced here in Strasbourg already. So finally, I really would like to ask you if it would be possible that we collect good practices from all over Europe and really show how integration can work. And we all want, I think we all want the same, a good life and well-being of people all over Europe. Thank you very much for this wonderful occasion to be here.
Thank you very much for such good concrete ideas. And the last one you've said, I mean, the 2 initiatives, the garlic initiative and the kindergarten integration, are both extremely good examples, as was your one in Dresden about the 3,000 people gathering in the parks. And I think if it's all right with AISTE, it might be a good idea if people send in individual initiatives that either from their towns, so that at least something comes from the meeting we're having now, from their towns, that is such a good idea, or initiatives that they know are going on in other towns of Europe that are helping towards positive intercultural relations, then I think we would have a long collection, and it would be something concrete that the Council of Europe are doing. I hope that's all right with you, Aiste. If it isn't the work for you, you can pass it on to a relevant person, but it would be something concrete that would emerge from just the verbiage that we are giving today, and thank you for your idea. I will take Mr. Davis's points for our panel on the points of the first question for all three of you. I'll start with Mr. Nylander this time. The fact that there is no Islamic State and that austerity, which was one of my questions, in a time of austerity, the anti-immigrant, anti-foreigner feeling, homophobia, all of those get much worse when we have austerity. So comments from all three of you, please. Mr. Nylander.
We don't discuss it so much, but if you have seen the television, it's every day in the news you talk about the Islamic states. But we don't discuss it so much in the municipality. But as the question was why it's so lots of media, I don't know. But the media is, what you should say it in English. In Sweden it's much easier to say it in Swedish. But if they are guarding everything who it's that's terrible with war. All the war is terrible. But if they have so lots of propagandas, I think people get afraid and they mix the religion and the war. I think I stopped there. It's difficult in English.
Thanks very much, Dirk Hilbert.
Thank you. What made people take to the streets? I think it's fears. I think people have a number of fears, and these fears must be taken seriously. And in terms of our city, what happened was that at the beginning, I think there was balanced communication, but not on the part of the media, and that actually contributed to greater frustration. So, unfortunately, we have to address all forms of violence in our societies, all the problems that we encounter today. We have to face them and tackle them. And in terms of our city, and I think this is particularly important, once again, I mentioned this earlier, there's a very low migration percentage in our population locally, but be that as it may, I think it's important to start at a young age, to organise twinnings, to organise school exchanges, to make sure that our young people can go and experience other cultures, meet with other cultures, experience them firsthand, get to know these cultures, because I think it's important to make sure that these phenomena are given a face, if you like, so not just talk about foreigners, but rather meet human beings. That's important to me, and I think that internationally that's the right thing to do as well. In our municipality, maybe foreigners are the exception to the rule, but nevertheless, I think it's important to think about it early on.
As everybody is saying, it is best to start the younger a child is. I must say, having gone to school in London with all sorts of nationalities, we didn't even know which nationality, which culture. We just knew each other's names, went to each other's houses and played. It was only when you became older that people said, oh, that was an Indian, that was a Pakistani. Didn't make a difference, because if you start young, that's natural. That's your life. So thank you for making that point, Mr. Hilbert. Mr. Muznieks, please.
Yes, on austerity and human rights, we've done a lot of work on this, and we put out an issue paper on safeguarding human rights in times of crisis, and I think it's still very pertinent. And there were three. If I were to summarize it all into 3 sentences, I would say there are 3 big recommendations. One is human rights and equality proof your budgets, to make sure that the most vulnerable are not being hit disproportionately in your budgets, and that equality is not growing, but that it's being kept under control. That inequality is not growing. The second is keep your human rights structures strong, because they're the ones who the most vulnerable turn to first, and make sure access to justice is available for everybody. And develop minimal floors through which nobody should fall in terms of basic welfare and health. The second point, I completely agree that if people are growing up in isolation of others from different cultural, linguistic, religious backgrounds, this is very fertile ground for prejudice and huge troubles later on. What does this mean from a public policy perspective? This means, first of all, Some separation is a cause of discrimination, so you have to combat discrimination. But others might be kind of self-isolation. So that we have to identify who is isolating themselves or who is being isolated and try to develop incentives so that they can interact with others, so that Roma kids have opportunities to interact with non-Roma kids, so that migrants, Muslims, others have opportunities at work during free time to interact with others. Otherwise, they will develop very stereotyped views of the majority, and the majority will develop very stereotyped views of them, and then we're in deep trouble.
Thank you. Yes, I think it starts very early. That's one thing that everybody said, as well as the fact of listening, which is another very good point that you've brought out, that it's about trying to talk to people and listen to where they're coming from as well in the situation. There was another question over there, I think. A hand went up and then disappeared again. So any more questions or points? Because we've got a few minutes before the end, but you may make a point and not a question. Yes.
I've got a question on human rights. I'm a past member of this organization, was chairman of the Europe Prize Committee some years ago. I'm worried about human rights in England, as many people are. We have many people who are bad guys, they're murderers, they do all sorts of very bad things, and they use the human rights law to prevent themselves being taken out of England and sent somewhere else back to their own countries. Surely the human rights law could be graded so that the really bad people could go home with their family if necessary, but not to have everybody having to stay there and cause trouble after they come out of prison.
Sorry, didn't hear that. Sorry, you didn't hear any of it. I'll do it again. No, I'm just saying that your point of view is a point of view that some people in England have. Some people say that that is a reason that they don't want to stay in the European Court of Human Rights. I would argue that you should argue the point you're saying, but we should not, England should stay in the European Court of Human Rights and not use that point of view as an excuse to get out. But nevertheless, I respect your right for saying it. There's another question over there.
Hello, my name is David Davies. I'm the Member of Parliament for Monmouth, and I'm afraid this is the first time I've attended this committee. I don't know this gentleman, but I do think he has a point, actually. Many of the people I spoke to are very angry at the way the Human Rights Act is abused. And, for example, if anyone Googles the name Mohammed Kendo, they will see he was a serial rapist who raped women on several occasions, was convicted, put in prison, then surprisingly let out, was convicted of doing the same thing again. He preyed on young women who were living alone and was able to argue under the convention that he should not be deported to Sierra Leone because it would impact on his right to family life. Now, when judgments like that are handed out, you can see why people are so angry and why so many people are saying, as they did to me on the doorstep, we have to get out of this and have nothing to do with it. The human rights of a serial rapist are worth far less than the rights of a young woman to live in peace. And I agree with that view, and I agree with what that gentleman said. And it's because people aren't listening to us that I think ultimately pulling out of it might be the only thing we can do to protect the human rights of people living in our country, law-abiding lives.
I have a question. Why are you letting serial rapists who are still dangerous out of jail?
Well, that's a very good question.
This is not the European Court of Human Rights doing this. This is your own court.
That is also equally a very good question. But that is down to the courts. As a politician, you know, in our country, I'm not allowed to influence the courts. If I could, by God, he wouldn't have been getting out of jail in the first place. But I can't tell a judge how long to sentence someone for, and that is a shame. But we can say that once they are out of prison, they should be deported if they're committing acts like that.
I would sincerely doubt that the only serial rapists you have are foreigners. I think that this is not an issue. This is not a European issue. This sounds like a domestic criminal law issue that you must contend with and stop blaming Europe for it.
We can't keep even serial rapists in prison for life, although there is an argument for saying we should. But if they are allowed out and they're not British, then they should be deported, and so should other murderers and people involved in terrorism.
I'm afraid I have to stop you there because we've only got about 1 minute, and I'd like to hear from Madame Fatalieva before we have to wrap the whole session. But thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the speakers for their presentations. I just want to make a few remarks. For the first time in my life, I visited Paris in 1999, and I had a picture in front of the Arc de Triomphe with me and my mom. And on the background, there were a lot of people walking down the street, only with European appearance, like French people. 16 years passed, and just last week I took another picture on the same place with my family, me 16 years older than I used to be, and with completely different types of people standing behind me. This was people from Arabic states, from Africa, from other countries. So this is, I think, this is the main indicator of how the main cities in the world are changing. This shows that now Europe opens its doors to the people all around the world. And of course, some of them are migrants, some of them are working permanently. So, but the appearance of the majority of the big cities in the world are changing. I come from a city, I come from Baku, from Azerbaijan, and we are proud to say that the background of our city never changes. It used to be a multicultural city centuries ago and still remains the same because a number of different ethnicities living in Azerbaijan in peace and brotherhood, and as a country which has experience in multicultural society, I may say that the most important thing is to have the mutual respect to each other, respecting each other's culture, respecting each other's traditions and ethnicity, of course. And it's very important to speak on the same language, not in linguistic manner, but a mental manner, to understand each other, to speak the same language. And continuing the issue of ISIS, I would definitely say that it's not a state, of course, whatever the media calls it. Definitely it's a terroristic organization which we all are fighting now. And it doesn't matter which name it has, whether it's Islamic State or something other. I think that it doesn't have anything in common with Islam at all. And there are a number of Islamic states, like Turkey, surrounding this terroristic organization, which are fighting against them. This means that we should fight with any kind of phobia, and first of all, Islamophobia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and that's almost a very good wind-up for the whole session, really, because I totally agree with that. We'll discuss that and hold on to that question while we take this next question as well.
My name is Elisabeth Potzinger. I come from Austria.
Way of life within our European way of life, that we welcome immigrants from anywhere and everywhere to put their new energies, their new ideas, their new cultures, their new thoughts into a society, to reinvigorate our society, to make us all proud of whoever we are and wherever we are, and to welcome anyone.
Ask that the speaker speak a little further from the microphone, because the microphone, the sound system is saturating. If someone is asking in English, please ask the speaker to...
Thank you very much, Dirk Hilbert, Friedrich Nylander and Niels Molzniak, and also Aiste and Priska Bartel, who spent a lot of time preparing this session. I very much hope that you will use the ideas and send them to, if she can take it, to Aiste Ramanaskaite. And from all of you, thank you for your questions, and thank you for being such an attentive audience. See you at the next session. And by the way, for the next session, before you go, we're going towards the chamber. Now, the mayors and heads of delegation have the seats reserved for them in the front rows of the hemicycle. But all the rest of us, the delegation members, will follow the ceremony from the tribunes, and the Secretariat will accompany both groups so that you know where you're going.
As integration assistance. And that's a really good practice, which is now also supported by our Foreign Minister, Mr.